Brad Thorpe, who is considered by many as the world's leading expert in isometric strength training.
We're with basically 5 NBA teams. Each one of them improved their defensive stats for points per game.
A wizard with the ball, he had it sent back by Jimmy Butler.
Has over 30 years of experience in the fitness, health, and performance industry. In 2022, Brad was dubbed as Mr. Isometrics.
You know, I don't spend money on marketing, and yet we're in 32 countries. We have over 360 clients since 2015. And that consists of the US Army, the FBI, 20% of the NBA. We have an MVP that uses ISOFIT.
Joel Embiid has got a 50.
You know, so we're in some pretty awesome places and helping some extraordinary athletes get better. I've been around isometrics and really heavily promoting it since about 2008. Just basically using a wall, right? You can do like isometrics over here. If I'm using this table, I can push down and I can fire up my lat. If I'm pulling up, I can fire up my chest. If I'm using this wall behind me, I can do my posterior deltoid. But we've never thought about that. What they stated was, it was on a radio show, and they did some research, and what they stated was isometrics was better for blood pressure. It stated that it was the equivalent of a single pharmaceutical agent for lowering blood pressure. And at that point in my life, I was struggling with hypertension for about 14 years. And I heard this one piece of literature, so I'm 21st person in the world with my designations. 14 years struggling with blood pressure. 2 weeks later, my blood pressure is normalized after 14 years by implementing an isometric training approach to my exercise routine. And I was still doing dynamic exercise and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that sort of stemmed from. And then from there, to get back to your original question, I just started basically jumped in the head first, went to the world and sort of said, everyone needs to start doing isometrics.
And it's actually surprising. I honestly think you're going to see an incredible jump here over the next couple of years, because what you're doing is impacting so many positively on a world stage. That part alone is going to be phenomenal, I think. So it'll be interesting to see whether that incognito mode comes off over the next couple of years. But what I did want to talk about is the fact that you had family members who had these issues as well, right? You had 2 individuals who had heart issues, blood pressure. So this is something you saw for decades, and you're like, I need to fix this because I'm going through it as well. Yeah.
So the reason I got into the exercise and performance world was my mom's dad died when she was 15 years old of a massive heart attack. So he was 45 years old, you know, so I never met my grandfather. But I lived in a house where heart health was always discussed. And then when my grandmother, so she died when I was 7. And also massive heart attack. She was 68. So my mom would have been 33, 34 years of age at that point. So significantly younger than I am. So grew up just in that household where it was like, you know, my mom lost her parents. You know, my dad's always been in the picture. And, you know, a couple of years ago, he had basically heart surgery as well. So we've always been around heart health. So for me, that's the driving force, is how do we help individuals who are out there with hypertension, which obviously can lead or is a root cause of stroke, as well as heart failure or heart attack. You know, so if there's a way that is better for, why aren't we promoting it? Why aren't we jamming it down people's throats? That here's a better, safer, more effective and efficient way to lower blood pressure. Like most people will tell you, go out and do cardio training to train your heart. It's inefficient, it doesn't work, and the result of, you know, if you look at the studies, the results are garbage. Like they're absolutely garbage, as opposed to if you compare them directly to isometrics, isometrics reigns supreme. And this is going, the American Heart Association has put this out. British Journal of Sports Medicine came out 2 years ago, and they did a comparative analysis between cardiovascular training, resistance training, high intensity interval training, and isometric training. And isometric training won.
Wow.
Right? And you look at that and you go, well, all those other things are what we consistently promote. Yes, absolutely. And that's why we have 1.7 billion people with hypertension issues. I resolved mine in 2 weeks. We've helped countless people get off blood pressure medication once implementing an isometric training approach. And there's multiple reasons for that. We focus, when we're talking about cardiovascular health, we focus on the heart, and we focus on your blood pressure, and we focus on heartbeat traditionally. Nobody ever talks about how the blood gets back to your heart, which is controlled via a muscle pump. So if you have an inefficiency to your muscular system, your heart has to work harder in order to circulate your blood, right? So if I create better levels of muscle contractility, right? So if my glenohumeral joint, so shoulder joint, if that compresses better because my muscle tension increases. So if you think of the artery as a series of tubes, right? If I take a tube and put it on stretch, what happens? It narrows, it thins. Okay, cool. Is that 100% predictable?
No.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Every time?
100% of the time, if you stretch a tube, it always thins.
Yeah.
Right? So if you take it off stretch, you're going to have a wider diameter and a thicker wall.
Okay.
Right? And that's 100% predictable. It's principles of elasticity.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, cool. And their arteries and veins and stuff like that are of elastic nature.
Right.
So if I'm able to cause better levels of compression, that artery opens up. It's kind of like going from a 1-lane highway to a 4-lane highway.
It's like Toronto construction that doesn't take a decade.
Man, have you seen this garbage? It's awful, right? But yeah, it's exactly like that. So if you have congestion within sort of the flow of blood, you're going to have higher levels of peripheral resistance. So yeah, so that's basically my driving force. And I'm now working with guys with what are called LVAD, so left ventricular assist device.
The zombie.
The zombie. Oh, you did your research. Yeah. Good old Keith down in Katy, Texas. So we work with him. So Keith basically has a non-functioning heart. He died. He died. He was in a coma for 3 months. Zero function to his heart. He's on this thing called an LVAD, which is left ventricular assist device. So he's a former ISOFIT user. So it's like, Keith, let me see if I can help you. At this point, he was basically died, brought back to life, doesn't have a heart, has basically couldn't even adjust the ISOFIT when he got it. We started with a 1 minute per day protocol. Right? He's like, what's 1 minute a day going to do for me? I'm like, get you to 2 minutes. Yeah. He's like, oh, okay, logical,
overload
progressive. Yeah, because the cool thing is when you're looking at isometrics, there's some research out there that will indicate that 1 minute of isometric muscle force or a muscle contraction is the equivalent to 6 minutes of dynamic resistance training on selectorized equipment. So for Keith, we started with 6 minutes, and we went to 12 minutes, and then we went to 18 minutes, then we went to 24 minutes, and by the time we got to 5 minutes, we're now doing half an hour training, or the equivalent of.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that's way more efficient. Yeah, absolutely. If I can save you 25 minutes in your time and give you a better result. But with Keith, what it was, we got him to a point where he is strong enough so he could start to participate in life. And to me, that's like my ultimate success story. It's beautiful. And we were just talking before we started up, like Joel Embiid. So I'm a supplier to the Philadelphia 76ers and a bunch of the other NBA organizations. So yeah, we have an MVP that uses ISOFIT.
That didn't last year. And they had the best season since Allen Iverson, which I think was 2001. But James Harden led the league in assists. Joel Embiid led the league in points. Now is deemed the MVP. They got to close it out. Just for ISOFIT's sake.
Yeah, well, more for the city of Philadelphia and all the athletes. I mean, we're a component of an extraordinary team of professionals. And, I would love to say, yes, it's all ISOFIT. It's, they bought it and they transformed. But I'm not going to say that it hasn't had an impact because of all the other teams that we saw have impact. So we're with basically 5 NBA teams. Each one of them improved their defensive stats for points per game. Right?
Wow. We
had number 1 team, number 2 team, and number 3 team. I think Minnesota was 18, I believe, in the league. And then the Houston Rockets, they improved. Unfortunately, they're a really young team, but they just got some amazing coaching. So I'm excited to see where they go next year, and hopefully they get Victor Wembanyama out of France, which would be amazing. So he formerly was with an ISOFIT team. So
you think of like now impacting 20% of the NBA clients, like the FBI, the U.S. Army. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was the fact that like these are ultimately just athletes at the end of the day working in these emergency response roles. You strip it down, these guys are wearing uniforms, these individuals are wearing uniforms. At the end of the day, everyone is just competing, becoming a better athlete. And what your system is doing is making people better athletes across the board.
I would say we specialize in human performance. So if you're human and you want to perform better, and that doesn't matter if you're an 85-year-old grandmother of 23, it doesn't matter. If we can engage your muscular system better, you're going to function better as a human. The likelihood of disease goes down.